Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. We were just joined by family members of Dontre Hamilton, a young man who was living with mental illness when he was shot 14 times by a Milwaukee police officer. As we turn our focus now to mental illness, it is defined as a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. My next guest is Brenda Wesley, who is the Director of Education and Outreach for NAMI Greater Milwaukee. Good morning, Brenda.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. And first and foremost, if you could, tell us more about NAMI. I think you guys take pride in being the nation's voice on mental illness. So tell us more about what it is you guys do on a daily basis.
Well, actually, our mission is to support and provide services and improve the lives of people living with a mental health disorder, as well as family members. And we do this through the advocacy work that we do, the support programs that we offer, but I think most importantly, the education that we offer as well, because it's very important. Because I think mental illness is the last frontier that we can openly and honestly make fun of an individual and not be ashamed by our actions. So because it's still so stigmatized that we don't talk about it. So I think our educational component is very important so we can teach individuals, not only the community at large, but even service providers about mental health and that it is a brain disorder and it's not a character issue.
Yeah, and even in the open when I'm saying that people who have depression or things of that nature, a lot of times people don't even put that under the umbrella of mental health, but it just goes to show that everyday people on every level of life deal with mental health issues on a daily basis, but with the proper attention and the proper medication in some cases, they can function just like everybody else.
Absolutely. Recovery is possible, and mental health is a spectrum. You know, you can have a mild, you can have a medium, you can have severe and chronic. You may not always have to be on medication. You may need therapy, support, all of those elements. It's like I compare it to cancer. We have cancer, the umbrella of cancer, and we have all the diagnoses of cancer. And mental health and mental illness is the same thing. We have so many different diagnoses of a mental illness, but we kind of paint a broad brush, like you mentioned, depression, is that people, you know, they don't understand that there are so many different disorders under this umbrella of mental health and mental illness.
Yes, so you did mention that when a person is diagnosed, it's not only affecting them as an individual, but it does affect everybody close to them and the ones that they love. So it is important for those people as well as the individual to understand what needs to be done in order to be on the forefront of taking care of all the things that need to be contended with regardless of what the situation may be. So let's talk about some of your programs and services. You have a free 12-week course called Family to Family.
Yes, and it's a 12-week course that we offer to family because just as you mentioned, being a caregiver or a family member, if you don't understand mental health, and we know that behavior and moods are symptoms of a mental health disorder. So if you within yourself don't understand it and you think it's a person just acting badly or bizarre, you may want to run away from it. So we offer the Family to Family course for family members, and they learn everything from symptoms, what are the various diagnoses, medication, how to advocate for a family member. So you get a plethora of information. Even 12 weeks is not long enough, but you get a better understanding of how to be a caregiver to someone living with a mental health disorder.
All right, and you also have a unique program that's called Peer-to-Peer. Fill us in on that.
Peer-to-peer is for the person living with a mental health disorder, because with the diagnosis, you don't get the education. You don't know that your life is changing and how to take care of yourself. So we offer a class to those living with a mental health disorder of how to take care of yourself, how to eat correctly, medication management, all of those issues. And if you feel yourself not feeling well, to identify what to do in order to seek services if you feel like you're just kind of spiraling a little bit.
When it comes to the minority communities, mental health is not always talked about or discussed, and that's mainly because of the stigmas that have been put on mental health issues. But statistics show us that Latinos have higher rates of major depressive episodes, anxiety, alcohol, and other drug abuse. And suicide rates among African Americans aged 10 to 14 rose 233% across a recent 15-year span. It goes on. African Americans also have higher rates of incarceration, homelessness, and foster care. And those in those circumstances, they're at a higher risk for developing mental health issues. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And trauma, a lot of that is trauma induced, and also if you are predisposed to a mental health disorder. But in our community, we pretty much think that you need to pull yourself up by your bootstrap, you need to be strong. But when you think about the aftermath of being incarcerated, what is it like to be incarcerated? The trauma behind that, the trauma of violence in our community, poverty, all of the issues that happen in our community that can bring on mental health disorders like major depression and of course trauma. But in our community, we were always looked at as just being bad and not and of course cycling through the criminal justice system as well. But now they're really looking at the community and what it's like to live in poverty and violence and all of the issues that plague our community.
Yeah. Early in the show, as I had mentioned, we had the family members of Dontre Hamilton here. Those who have followed the news, they know that he was living with schizophrenia, and at the time he hadn't been taking his medication, and there were circumstances that led to that, and that's some of the things that you help families deal with as well. But the fact that the officer made assumptions that ultimately cost a man his life, this has had to have sparked some conversation within your organization on how to better deal with scenarios like this.
Absolutely. And then when we think about mental health and we think about violence, people living with a mental health disorder are no more violent than the normal population. But with the stigma behind that, because the way that we portray people living with a mental health disorder is that you automatically think that there's some sense of violence that may be occurring, but absolutely not. So we train, and we train law enforcement officers too, as well as the community. Just because someone may be hallucinating, talking to themselves, or maybe not doing well, it does not mean that that person is going to attack you. And it's the way that you talk to that individual as well.
Okay, so Police Chief Ed Flynn has promised to better train officers when it comes to these type of situations. So what do you think needs to be done for officers to be better trained to have this not ever happen again?
Well, you know, we have a training called CIT, Crisis Intervention Team training of officers, and we do have a class coming up with Milwaukee Police Department in November, as well as they're going to be training their entire police force. Again, training them to identify and to understand mental health issues and not be afraid of it, and understand that it's a biological illness, not stigma. The person is acting badly, to be afraid for your life, all of those issues that we train officers on how to handle that. But with Dontre, he was not exhibiting any of those traits, and it was just an assumption. But again, with a police officer, to assume that there's going to be violence behind someone living with a mental health disorder, that's not how we train people to think about mental illness.
Okay, we have a little bit of time left, just a little bit. So with that said, you also have a program, ASK, Access, Support, and Knowledge, that you put together. Tell us quickly about that.
Yeah, I developed that when my son was diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and I realized that there was not enough education in the Black community to address mental illness, and so it's Access, Support, and Knowledge, where I go out into the African American community and I train lay people as well as professionals to understand the concept, again, of mental health, because I believe that education is absolutely the cure-all. Is to understand mental illness.
As with everything, education is key.
Education.
Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
stopping by. I appreciate all the great information. Brenda Wesley is the Director of Education and Outreach for NAMI Greater Milwaukee. Their website is NAMI, NAMIGRM.org, and their phone number is 414-344-0447. And that is going to do it for today's show. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. As always, I thank you for watching, and I do hope you join us again next week as we take yet another look at our issues in Milwaukee. Have a great day.